How'd you like the rainfall simulator? Excellent, huh? So the question is, to me, is when he did not have as much water off of the patch that had cover crops, where did the water go? Why didn't it come through? Because the soil is like a sponge. So it actually assumed more of the water, both because it didn't run off and both because it didn't go through the pan and fill the jug up underneath. You know, that's the great thing about soil health. You know, as we look at soil health, if you can imagine the best chocolate cake you've ever seen, you see all those porous things in it. That's what we want the soil to look like. You know, and that's why that tray held more water. At home, we can hold a 6.5-inch rainfall event before we have any runoff problems. You know. Luckily, just a little information I'll give you. We have 2 flumes on our farm. One flume collects surface runoff off of a 42-acre watershed. The other flume is hooked to a tile with 120 acres of watershed. The flume that's on the surface runoff was installed 3 years ago. And as of yet, in 3 years, that flume has not seen any water in it. They claim that the university professor that's doing the research wants to know if it rains on our farm because he thought they would surely have rain from the surface. But with the amount of cover crops and no-till we've done, now this field's been in no-till and cover crops for 50 years, never been tilled for 50 years, and we can infiltrate 6 inches of water at a time. That's why you don't have runoff. His biggest problem is he can't write his research paper because he says he can't use 0 to make the answer. In my mindset, 0 in a big black circle 5 inches in diameter means that nothing left. So if nothing left off of my farm, my little ditch did not get any phosphorus or nitrogen or sediment in it. You know, I think that tells the whole story. You know, the neat thing about the flume on the tile line, it goes for 1 mile. It starts out at a 4-inch tile and ends up at an 8-inch tile at the ditch. They have monitored it. It has water in it almost year round. Interesting thing, when we have a 3-inch or a 4-inch rainfall event, the amount of flow only goes up a 1/4 inch in the tile. That's because we have this sponge. But what they found out was that we have that 1/4 inch of flow for almost 30 days after the rainfall event, because that soil is releasing it slower. So guess what that means? We don't have that flush of water going into the stream wanting to cause a flood event, you know. Enough about this rainfall simulator in our soils. Our leases. We have almost 20 landlords running from 5 acres up to about 100. We have, every one of them has a different lease. Some of them are because they're older. We've been farming for 15 or 20 years, so it's just a lease. We pay the landlord X amount of dollars. We get them out in the field to show them what we're doing, and they're pleased with it. 6 of my landlords are over 80. They're lady landlords. The challenge for David is to make sure that 2 of those 6 field farms always have sunflowers on it every 3 years. Because it's like a lottery system with these gals. They all get together and they want to know when it's their turn to have sunflowers on their farm. You know. So I don't have any trouble with them. And no matter who walks in and wants to rent the farm, they're not going to rent it because they know that we're doing a good job and they like the sunflowers, you know. We had just rented a new farm a year ago. The fellow that rented to us was in CRP. He came to one of our field days in April. He was concerned about how we was going to treat the soil after it was come out of CRP. We sat down with him. We made a lease agreement with him. We run a soil sample. We checked organic matters, phosphorus, potash, all the good stuff. And then he says, David, if you'll put the cover crop in and it's green before snow melts, we'll take $10 an acre off the lease. I thought that was a nice thing, you know. So that was one of the things. We have 2 new leases that we started 3 years ago where the people call us, we sit down with them, we pull soil samples, we show them where they're at, you know. On this sample, we look at the phosphorus and the potash, organic matter, and the pH, because we know it takes us so many pounds of lime to change the pH. And what we did, we set a rules. I said, if you want to get rid of us, and we have improved the pH, we improved the phosphorus, we improved the potash. I don't worry about the trace elements. We're going to improve them too, but we only talk about 3 things. We don't want to confuse them. And if they terminate our lease and we've increased those commodities, we'll call the fertilizer company. They'll tell us how much P and K cost and how much lime is. The university's told us how much it takes to change those numbers on our soil sample, and they pay me the difference. Vice versa, if we lower it, which I know we won't, but if we do, we pay twice as much the value of the commodities it takes to replace them. We have other leases that are a flat lease for a year, signed every year, but we also put it on there, if we meet the county average, we'll pay the rent. If it's above the county average, we'll give them a premium on top. And most generally, we're sending about $30 more an acre to our landlords on those agreements because we're that much higher if they allow us to use the cover crops. And everybody lets us use them, you know. I think the thing about landlords, you need to understand it's your land. You know, I try to explain that to landlords that ask me. It's your land. What do you want done with it? You know, do you want it just farmed? Do you want it wore out? Do you want to make it better? You know? And usually they always want to say, yes, we want to make it better. Now, we have some landlords that's in the 45 to 60 year gap that they've just inherited it, and all they care about is dollars. Joe Smo come over and they offered him $300 an acre. David, it's going to cost you $300. Well, we can't make money at $300, so we don't rent it. You know, because you can't keep those kind of people happy. They just looking at dollars. But it's your land, and if you want it protected, you need to tell your operators, we would like you to think about learning to use practices that's good for the soil, that'll keep your farm in production, and improve it. You know, I think the big key we have to keep thinking about is how are we going to feed the world? You know, we've been produced by all the universities, no matter where you go. I like to pick on Ohio State because I know about them. I don't want to say anything about Michigan, so I don't know. But, you know, Ohio State says we need to keep producing more yield, you know. So if we look at how we're doing things today, now we're approaching 200 bushel yields as an average, you know. 10 years ago, we were at about 130, 140, and our corn had about 7.5 to 8% protein. You know, if you look at Morris feeding books when I was in high school in '65, it said corn had 8.8% protein. U.S. corn today averages less than 5%. My comment to all these people that says we have to produce more in yield, will less protein feed the population, or if we increase the protein and increase the profitability of it, is that the way we're going to feed the world? You know, those are the things I think we need to keep in consideration. Leases are simple, I think. Some can be more. If you go out to Indiana, Illinois, you know, it's all based on yields. Some of these guys are paying $150 flat rate rent, and they give 40% of the gross money to the landowner, you know, whatever the yield is. To me, that's too difficult. I mean, I got to have it simple for David. My math skills aren't that good, you know. Maybe that's not the right way to, but we try to make sure that our landlords on our operations have enough to pay their taxes, their insurance, and have some money left over, you know. Because as things go up, that's what they need. These older people need that money to make it work, you know. And by doing soil health practices, we are about 16% better than the county average on all the crops we grow. I'm supposed to take an hour. I don't know how we can take an hour on leases, but any questions on leases or anything we've talked about presently that we can talk about, or anything else you would like to learn about in this hour that I've got to wait, not to waste, but to educate you. Yes, sir.
I had a question. You said you leased the field that was in CRP in the past. How did that compare soil-wise to the ground that you've been doing no-till on for years?
I would say it's like having that farm in a cover crop for 3 years. Because as you look at CRP ground, most of it either has warm season, lots of warm season species that's been an perennial, or they got cool season species and they don't have a mixture of legumes and brassicas to improve the soil. So, you know, we looked at this farm and it had 1.5% organic matter after 10 years. You know, we've been on that farm for 3 years. We now have that farm at 3% organic matter under cultivation. You know, we went to his woodlot, and his woodlot's got 2.5% organic matter. So, you know, he didn't improve it to the woodlot. So I'm not saying that the only thing we did see, we had pretty good infiltration, we had pretty good root structures, you know, and stuff really responded. And by doing the cover crop with it, it really helped it. And I think that was what really made it work well, you know.
Dave, I have a question. What about the length of leases? If you, as a producer, are going to invest in cover crops on a field, do you ever ask for a 2 or 3 year lease? Is that common? Have you heard of guys doing that? How do you manage that? Because you're putting in a big investment.
I really like to talk to landowners, and we've been able to talk to landowners that inherited, that's let's say from 25 to 40, that really know and understand what they want from their soils. You know, they want their soils to be regenerative, they want good products coming off of it, and those are the ones we can talk to about a 5 or 6 year lease. We rented 2 farms in May, come available in May to us. The guy just bought them. Why he leased them to us, I don't know, but he called us. He says, I would like you to farm these farms. We may sell them off for development. I says, I understand that. But I said, I'd like to have a 5 year lease because these farms are wore out. And I says, we will build this soil, we'll make it green, we'll make it look nice, we'll clean up some of the things around, and we got a 6 year lease on that farm. If we only have 1 year lease, and the problem, we got one farm, they won't lease it to us because the family's in a squabble. They're not getting along. Mom's in a rest home. 2 of the kids are on the farm. 3 of them's off the farm. The off-farm person has power of attorney. It's a real bitchin' mess. I mean, and I'm caught in the middle of it. But, you know, they rent it to me on June the 1st because they can't decide what they want to do with it. And they terminate me in August. You know, that farm don't get cover crops. That farm needs cover crops. I was able to have the in-laws that's never been on a farm there last week, showed them what we were doing, asked them, I said, I know you may want to sell it, but if you give me permission to plant cover crops this fall, even though you want to sell this thing, and if you don't sell it and you lease it back to me, there'll be no charge for the seed for the cover crop. That's how important I think the cover crop is. I'm not asking to pay me to do the work. I'm just saying pay back the seed cost. And it's only going to be rye, so it's only going to be like 12 or 15 bucks an acre, you know. But if not, then we can maybe have our foot in the door to get it a little earlier so we can make some more plants. But this farm's been farmed so hard that there's only about 3 acres out of 100 that'll grow an umbrella, you know. So those are hard to determine with. Those are hard to work with. Our annual leases that we have, they have an understanding, and they just keep rolling ahead. All of our leases are terminated in August. If they don't give us a notice by August 1st, we assume we have it. Now, we're not going to hold them to the stone if they call us in May and say we sold it or somebody else offered more money. If they offer more money, we're going to argue with them because we say we have a lease that said we terminated in August, you didn't do it. But rather than aggravate them, we just let them have it. But that way we know we can plan ahead. If they haven't notified us by August 1st, we know we can put a cover crop in and continue to do the annual lease payment. You know. But we treat all of our land like we do our home farm. I think that's important. The years we have wheat, we don't make very much money, but we save money because we get the cover crop there that we can reduce the nutrients for the corn crop the next year. And that's kind of the short and sweet of it.
Perfect. Any questions?
Yes, sir.
Is there not landowner specific, just looking at the land, is there reasons to not go after a field? I mean, do you think with these principles, you know, no matter what, I can basically take on any type of land, or do you have things you shy away from?
Well, I guess I'm gutsy enough to say I'll take on anything anybody gives me, unless it's underwater. You know, we do have one field that the water table is about 9 inches above the top of the ground, about 6 months out of the year. And we dug down in that farm. It's about a 17-acre field. We get about 7 acres of corn planted up till 3 years ago. And Ray Archuleta was on our farm, and I took him over there and showed it to him. And at that time, there was about 2 inches of water on it, and the corn was all yellow and crappy and gone. And he said, David, I know what I'd do with this. And I said, what do you do with this, Ray? And he says, I'd go to Sam's Club and buy about 600 pounds of rice, plant rice. I says, well, you would. He says, yeah. He says, the rice will break through that hard pan. He says, you got a hard pan about 20 inches deep, you know. And I said, okay. So I listened to Ray, and I went and we destroyed, 4 or 5 acres of corn and went in there and planted rice in that thing. And the rice got about this tall. And by golly, next spring come by, the water hole was only about 1/4 of an acre out of 7 acres. So it did work. And this year, 100% of the corn's grown in it because it's been drier. But, you know, we were able to dry up that hole without doing tallies. Now, how long that'll last, I don't know. You know. But it was one way we could keep doing production. So I'm not afraid. If we get it soon enough, you know, if we get a farm in March or April that they want to rent to us, and we get it that soon, the first thing we'll do, immediately after we sign the agreement, we will plant buckwheat in it, as long as it's past the frost date. Because buckwheat will mature in 30 days, but it'll put about 3 or 4 inch root zone into that soil, which will loosen that surface and give us a good seed bed for whatever crop we're going to plant into to make crop money. You know. Yes, sir.
Buckwheat even on muck ground?
If it's not got waterlogged, yeah, it'll grow. You know. If you got muck ground, I'd look at Balanza clover. About 1 pound per acre. Maybe mix a little bit of oats with it so you have some grass with it. Oats are going to die if it's too wet, but you know, oats are fairly cheap. 15 to 20 cents a pound. And those, you know, you can buy them for feed oats, they'll grow. They don't have to be certified for what you're trying to do. And those are some of the things we've tried, and it has worked fairly well. But it depends, you know, and you've got to realize that everything depends on weather. You know, I can't give you a prescription that's going to, you do this every year and it works. You know. For 2 years in a row, we look back at 2000 and 2020. Normal rainfall for our area is 31 inches. We had 67 inches of rain. 2021, we had 65 inches of rain. Guess what, guys? You have to make adjustments. You know, you have to learn to make adjustments. Another thing, we don't carry crop insurance. We don't really participate in the government programs. Because if you start participating in these things, then you're limited to what you can do. You know? So I know that if I have a corn failure, and it's the 1st of June, or the tail end of June, and the hail comes and knocks it all out, Dave Brandt's going to find something that grows. Because I have no recourse to get the money. So, you know, we either look at grain sorghum, we look at flax, we look at rape, we look at something that we know we can sell. And how you know you can sell it, I'll tell you what, when you got 3,000 or 4,000 bushel of flaxseed, or 4,000 bushel of canola, you're definitely going to find a market. You know, might not pay as much as you want it to, but you're going to find some place to get rid of it. You know. So I say if you build it, you can get rid of it. You know. Yes, ma'am.
In the fall time, is it better, would you recommend doing cereal rye planting or buckwheat?
Well, I think cereal rye is the key because you got so big a window, weather conditions don't affect it as bad as buckwheat does. Yeah. You know.
Any other questions?
Yes, ma'am.
When do you plant, or when do you recommend planting buckwheat? Like what time of the year?
Well, you know, I like it in August because in August it does a really nice job. 45 days later, so about September 15th, September 20th, we may get a first frost. So guess what? It's made seed. We can combine it. You know, you can get something out of it. If you pick up a farm and you know it's low in fertility, and you can plant it in the spring before you plant another crop, you know, you can count on 30 or 40 pounds of phosphorus in 30 days. You know, at $400 or $500 a ton for phosphorus, that's probably going to be $12 or $13 an acre savings, but you'll more than pay for the buckwheat. Plus you get the root zone. Just depends on when you're picking this piece of property up and what you're trying to do with it. You know.
Well, thank you, Dave.
Yep. Thank you.